All right, in this video, I'm going to show you guys exactly how to get your front desk to handle a lot more objections like an actual pro so that you can stop losing patients to dumb objections like cost and insurance and all the things that you guys typically are losing your patients from. And so in this video, I'm going to cover two things. Number one, I'm going to cover why most front desks actually struggle to handle objections, how we actually get them to. And then number two, I'm going to reveal a very simple framework, what I call a tie down framework, so we can handle all objections and make your front desk life a lot easier. And so this is the exact objection handling framework I've used in my cash practice. We used it to start converting some of our colder traffic, Facebook and Google ads traffic, and we added $120,000 in revenue back to my practice every single year using this framework. And so by the end of this, I want to teach it to you so that you can easily add revenue and more cash patients back to your practice, and we can start handling these objections like a pro. So how did I actually like come about this like style of framework, right? And the biggest thing is I started getting really busy in my cash practice. I didn't have the time to follow up with leads, but I was also wanting to continue to grow. And so one of the easiest ways to do that is we started paying for Facebook ads, Google ads. And very quickly I realized, hey, I don't have the time to follow up with these people. I was still treating at the time, and I really needed to have somebody to be able to start to own this process a little bit. And so I do what most practices do. I hired a front desk, right? And we brought her on, and I handed her a sales script. We did some role playing, and I listened to a couple of her calls, and I was like, "Wow, this sounds great. We should be in really good shape." And I gave her some of our like easier leads to start, which was some of our warmer like referral patients, and she was converting them. I was like, "Great, we should be in really good shape to actually get this to work out well." And suddenly, as she started out kind of hot. And then after a couple of weeks and a couple of months, I started to look at the amount of leads we had coming in versus the amount of people that we actually had getting scheduled. I say a couple of weeks, like I was a little more quick on it. Unfortunately, I was super busy. It was like months down the line before I started to realize this. But I started to realize that we weren't scheduling nearly as many people as I thought we should be. And our new provider that we'd hire, his schedule was not nearly as busy as it needed to be. And I started to kind of wonder what was going on. I was like, we're driving traffic to the practice. Why are we not growing? And so I started having conversations with my front desk, and she's like, hey, I'm getting a lot of like cost objections, or I was getting a lot of cost and insurance objections in the clinic. And hey, it's too expensive, or I want to go in network. And there were just so many objections that were starting to come up. And my front desk, as I went back and listened to it, she wasn't really handling any of them, right? And it was, hey, I need to go in network somewhere. And like she just didn't know what to say, right? Like she was like, okay, well, like I'll follow up with you, or let me know if you need anything, or hey, I need to think about it, or hey, I need to talk to my spouse. And it was like all of these objections were kind of smoke screens because the phone call wasn't where it needed to be, and she had no idea how to handle these things. And I was left in this position now, like, hey, I've done a really bad job as the leader of this practice, giving you the tools that you want. And so I kind of started going down this rabbit hole. I was in a lot of coaching groups for my practice and trying to figure out how we actually learned to handle these. And I started reshaping some of our scripts and some of our frameworks. I started paying thousands of dollars for a lot of other like sales coaching so that I could learn how do I actually have conversations and ethically without being pushy or without being salesy, without sounding like a sleazy car salesman? How do I actually have conversations with patients that help them recognize the value in what it is that we're trying to do? And that's where I kind of discovered the framework that I'm going to share with you today. And I'm going to also share why I think most front desks struggle. And we started having conversations, and we started meeting regularly. And a lot of what it was, or what I started to figure out, and this is conversations I have with admins all over the country at this point, is, hey, why do they struggle with this? And one of the first big ones is many of them don't even think it's their job to actually handle some of these objections. They think, well, you handed me a sales script. I followed up with a lead like you asked me to. They told me it was too expensive. Therefore, I'm going to move on to the next lead because you have leads coming in the door. And there was no expectation set that, hey, here's the number of new leads that if you talk to them, I actually want this many people scheduled. And so now any front desk I hire, or any admin that we place in other practices is, hey, we have to set the expectation early on that, hey, yes, you have to actually be able to handle these objections. And here's the expectation of the number of people that you should actually be scheduling. And I think that's the biggest thing of all of this is just setting expectations that, hey, yeah, it is your job to be able to have these conversations. Now, the next one is a little more obvious is they just don't know how to do it. Like they have no tools whatsoever. You handed them a sales script, maybe they shadowed for a couple of days with another front desk staff member, and all of the information that's in your head as the office manager or as the practice owner doesn't actually get relayed over to the front desk, or it's buried in some like SOP document somewhere. And it's like, wow, this is dense, right? It's like we've got all this information buried, but or some of you guys don't even have the actual frameworks you need to be able to have these conversations. So, what would you say on the phone if somebody said, "Hey, I need to talk to my spouse," or "Hey, I need to, check with my insurance company," those kind of things. Like, you've got to be able to have stuff that you would say, and if not, you need to go seek out the information so that your front desk can actually know what to say as well. And hopefully, this framework I'm going to show you here in a bit will help with that as well. But they need to know exactly how to execute this stuff. And oftentimes they neglect some of this objection handling framework or being able to talk to patients because they're buried in other administrative stuff like back end stuff, faxing stuff, putting it in Google Drive, and just all these other things that they get bogged down with. And that's the thing that just kind of gets put on the back burner, right? Now, the last thing and the reason why I think most front desks struggle with this is we don't coach them regularly. Most people treat the front desk like hey, I'm going to train you for a week, and why don't you contact me if you have any issues? And you think you mean well by leaving the door open or the door cracked, so to speak. The problem is they don't even know what they don't know, or they don't even know what to ask you, and so you have to be very proactive to have conversations, auditing phone calls and regularly coaching them. And this is something I do with my admin literally still to this day. We met last week. We typically meet bi-weekly where we pull up some phone calls that were maybe challenging. We literally rip through that phone call and we talk about what we could have done better, what could we have changed. And my admin's heard me coach her so much at this point that she knows how engaged I am in the process where she proactively brings things to me now at this point. Hey, I'm seeing more cost and insurance objections from this Facebook lead that we're running. You may want to look at that, right? And so now we can have these proactive conversations and where we're regularly coaching and we're regularly communicating as opposed to, hey, you're just, mad and upset in the corner and they're mad and upset in the corner because they feel like they're not scheduling as many leads as you want them to, and there's just like this really weird thing that's going on. And so either that front desk leaves or you let them go. Most of the time, you guys just tolerate it until they leave. And then now you're making an emergency hire at the front desk, which is obviously something we don't want either. So I think those are some of the big reasons why the front desk may struggle with handling these objections. And now I want to give you guys the tools to actually handle this using a very simple framework, what I call a tie down framework. This is something that's really common in online sales. And all of that to say, this framework is really good and really important. I think people go about objection handling the wrong way, though. What I mean by that, they try to have this perfect script, and we literally have a lot of this information in our school community, where like I have word for word how I handle a lot of objections, and even on our YouTube channel. But the key still is I need to have a way to prevent objections from happening altogether. I don't need some perfect cutesy thing to say to absolutely everything or every objection that somebody has. And this is what this framework is meant for. It's meant to be kind of an open-ended conversation starter. But even before that, we can't ignore the discovery portion of the phone call. And I've done some other trainings about this, but the biggest mistake most of your front desk is making, especially if you're a cash service, is you're not providing enough value on the phone. These phone conversations aren't long enough. If you have a 3 to 4 minute discovery call, and then you try to use this framework at the end of your call, I guarantee you're still going to get objections and you're still going to have people canceling and no showing. So while this framework is good, and it can really help clean up some like ways and things to say to people, it's not going to be the magic bullet if the discovery call just kind of sucks as it is, right? And typically that is, hey, I had a conversation, I found out this person had shoulder pain, I got them scheduled, or I found out they had shoulder pain and they want to get back to working out, and then I just tried to schedule that person. You're going to lose every time, even with this framework. And so, I've got my kind of framework and questions to ask in our school community. So if you're not a part of that, definitely you want to look to join in. But the biggest thing is you cannot replace a good objection framework or a good objection handling if you don't have a good solid discovery. So that's my caveat to all this. This won't work. Like I'll get a message from one of you guys in a couple of weeks that says, "Hey, this doesn't work," and I'll go in and listen to the phone call, and it was like 5 minutes long, and you tried to use this objection framework. So word to the wise there. Okay, so what is the goal of this framework? The goal of this framework is I want to get all objections out of the way before we talk about price and before we talk about network status, obviously being out of network, right? And the reason I want to do that is because when price gets brought up or the fact that we're out of network, it can create kind of red flags in the listener's head, right? Where, and this is, you'll see this if you do this at the beginning of the phone call. Hey, do you take my insurance? And you just say, no, we don't. And you try to save them, like you can't save them, right? It's because they've already known your network status and they know the price of the visit. And so I want to try to get all of that stuff out of the way beforehand, right? It's almost like, hey, I'm trying to present you this car here. Let's say you're car shopping, and I'm presenting you a brand new car. It looks awesome. It's got 4 doors. It's got a sunroof. It's a pretty solid top of the line vehicle. And I show that vehicle to you. And I want to know how you feel about that vehicle as a whole. Do you like it? Is it what you're looking for? Were you looking for a 4-door sedan with a sunroof? And I ask you, hey, how do you feel about this vehicle? Is it what you're looking for? And I want to know if that answer is no, and I go to tell you, well, this vehicle's $45,000, but you didn't even like the vehicle to begin with. It doesn't matter how, it could be free, and you're not going to want the vehicle if it's not what it was that you were looking for, right? And so the same thing here. If I say, hey, how do you feel about this vehicle? And it's like, well, I don't I really like it. It looks nice, but I was actually kind of hoping to look at a truck. I just need something a little bit bigger. I've got kids, and I was hoping to be able to travel down to the beach with it, and I want to be able to throw all of our luggage in the back and not have to worry about it. And so, do you have any trucks? And now I can have a different conversation with this person that's in front of me. And can I help them with that or not? If I don't have any trucks on the lot, right? It's like, hey, maybe I'll refer them down the road. Or if I do have trucks on the lot, it's like, oh, I misunderstood you. I thought you actually wanted a car. So, okay, well, let's get all these out of the way and let me actually put in front of you what you're looking for, if it is what you can offer. And that's exactly what this objection framework is. And I'm going to walk you through the framework of it. And that's the gist of it is I want to know how somebody feels about the process of working with us, and do they think it's actually going to help them get back to what it is they want to do? Because if they don't like you, the way that you do things, and they don't think that you're going to be able to help them achieve whatever their goal is, again, I don't care if the visit's free. They're going to start objecting to cost, insurance. I need to talk to my spouse, all those things. And that's exactly what this does is it gets all of our objections out of the way before we even talk about cost or money, because cost or money makes that objection even greater at that point, right? And so here's how we do this, and this is in our script in our school community. If you haven't seen it, I'll link it below. Definitely jump into that. But the biggest thing is I will explain in depth what our initial evaluation looks like, talk about how it's different. I tell them exactly what's going to happen. And then I tell them exactly what follow-up process looks like. What are our follow-up sessions? How often do we see people? How often do people see us? And exactly what those look like. And I tell them how I'm going to be able to get them back to whatever their goal was, if we think we can help them, right? And basically, I say this. I say, okay, John. So, like, that's exactly how we do things. Typically, we're going to bring you in. And I explain all the process. So that's our process and how we do things. How do you feel about our process? Like, do you feel like it's ultimately going to be able to get you back to running 10 miles per week or whatever their goal is? And I ask them, how do you feel about it? And I want to know and I want to hear from them because typically I've done some talking at this point to tell them how things work. And I ask them, how do you feel about our process? And that's a very like non-confrontational question. I just genuinely want to know what this person's thinking. And if they think, yeah, this process sounds great and I want to get them and I think it's going to be able to get me back to where I want to go, Okay, awesome. Let's get you scheduled, right? And then we can handle some of these objections on the background in the back end. But I ask them how they feel about the process. And sometimes you'll get these answers that's like, oh, well, how do you yeah, I think that sounds good. It's like that doesn't sound very assuring. And so I want to get a number at that point. So I ask them, how do you feel about the process? I get a response. And then now I want to get a number. I want to understand where their head's at. Okay, got it. So just so I'm on the same page as you, on a scale of like 1 to 10, one's like, all right, I can't stand this Chris guy, or I can't stand this be ready practice. Like, I don't really think I want to schedule, and I'm ready to hang up. Or 10 is, hey, I feel really, really good about this, and I'm ready to go ahead and get scheduled because I think you guys are the right fit. Where do you feel like you fall on that scale? And now we're going to open the door and figure out exactly where their head's at. If anybody's less than an 8 out of 10, I don't care if the visit's $10, they're not going to schedule, right? And so if they say, "Yeah, I'm a 7," great, we need to find out why. But if somebody's a 9 or 10, it's like, "Hey, you got really good odds. You're probably not going to get too many objections at the end. We can go ahead and let's go ahead and get them scheduled, and then we can talk about cost and insurance and money and all that good stuff." But if they're a 7, or below, or 8 or below here, I wanna ask them, "Okay, got it. Well, like, I appreciate you being honest with me here. What do you feel like would make you maybe a 9 or 10?" And then ultimately, whatever they say at that point typically is going to be what the objection is. And the reason we do it this way is because maybe they thought their friend, or they saw online, hey, schedule this visit and we're going to help you fix your shoulder pain. And they thought, oh, I thought you were a chiropractor and I was going to come in and you were just going to adjust me and like I was going to be good, right? I didn't know that I was going to need to come in for multiple sessions, or I didn't know I was going to need to take these supplements to get to where I wanted to go, or I wasn't expecting to come in for more than one session. And you're going to find a lot of these objections on the front end of this. And that's okay. There's some prospects that just maybe aren't a good fit. Like, we'll talk to some people and they're like, hey, like, I'm only going to be in town for like the next month. And like, I'm flying out of the country for the summer, for, a travel abroad program, or if we treat some college students, or I've got a work trip coming up over the next month. And like, I just don't think it makes sense. And that's fine, right? That's a logistical barrier. And you're not going to win every single prospect over. But I at least know that, these are the reasons this person didn't want to schedule. Or what they will mostly tell you is like, let me think about it, and I'll call you back. And you don't even know why. Versus this framework allows me to understand why. And so let's recap this process and how it goes. I tell them exactly what the initial eval and follow-ups look like. What's a typical plan of care look like? And then I ask them, how do you feel about the process? I hear their answer. And then I ask them on a scale of 1 to 10, how do you, where 1 is like, I'm ready to hang up, and 10, hey, I'm ready to go ahead and get scheduled. Where do you fall? And it puts a quantifiable number on it. And anything 8 or greater, most likely this person's not going to be a problem to get scheduled. Or if there's 8 or below, then we want to ask what would make them a 9 or 10. And whatever it is that they say is typically the objection or the real reason they may not want to schedule. I'll tell you another example that's come up with this is like, we had a person call in and they were like, yeah, like, I got a lot of shoulder pain. We talked about their shoulder the entire time. And then we did this process with them. And their next words out of their mouth were like, like, it sounds good, but like, I'm just a little worried because I also have some knee pain. And I just don't know if, like, we talked a lot about my shoulder. Like, are you guys gonna be able to help me with that as well? And it was an easy conversation. We now opened the door. There was something we missed on the call. And now we were able to ask specific questions about that and talk about, absolutely, we can treat that. And this is something very easy. And that person after, they were like a 7 out of 10. And then we asked them that. And then they were like a 9 or 10 out of 10 after we actually talked about the knee and the major concerns that they had. And sometimes people bring some other things up. They're like, I'm a little, like, we do some dry needling. I'm a little fearful of dry needling. And you mentioned that that's something you guys do. That's something that I absolutely have to do. And it's like, no, dude, not at all. Like, if you're terrified of needles, we have other things. Or there's so many of these examples that pop up that cause somebody to say they want to talk to their spouse, or I need to think about it, or it's too expensive. You're going to catch all of these little uncertainties before you talk about price. And then when we talk about price, look, sometimes people just truly have a financial barrier, and that's okay. But if somebody is 9 out of 10 on the process, and they feel really good about it. And usually at that point, they're just like, hey, like I'm a broke college student. Like I just truly cannot afford to come in. What you guys are doing sounds great. I just can't afford to come in. And that's the best place to be when it comes to sales or talking to prospects, is we've done a good job of talking to this person. They want to come in, they just cannot financially make it work. But more often than not, it's a smokescreen that we didn't actually handle. So that's the objection handling framework. Ask them how they feel about the process, put a number on it, and then handle all of those objections. After we do that, let's get them scheduled, and then we can start talking about price and being out of network. And that's going to make your life a lot easier. Now, I do have some more specific videos about how to handle each of these little objections. You don't need to talk to my spouse. I need to think about it. I've got a lot of those on our YouTube channel. Feel free to continue to check those out. And if you have any questions, we'll see you there.